Hello and welcome to Georgia Legends. I'm Jeff Hullinger inside the Atlanta History Center. George Irvin Perdue III, better known to you and I as Sonny, has been a farmer, a football player, a veterinarian, and a businessman. But most Georgians know him from the tireless public service that he has engaged in for the last 40-plus years, always looking for a new challenge, never tiring from the task at hand. Sonny Perdue has had a full life, but seemingly always in search of his next role. He's been a county commissioner, a state legislator, a two-term governor, the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, and the chancellor of the University System of Georgia. Sonny Perdue has made it his lifelong duty to help the citizens of Georgia, always ready to face the next challenge with an intense work ethic and a passion to serve. George Irvin Perdue III was born on December 20th, 1946 to George and Ophi Perdue in Perry, Georgia, not far from the small farming community of Bonaire, where the family farm was located. His family would refer to the youngest Perdue as Sonny, a name that he would use for the rest of his life.
My grandfather was named George, my father was named Irvin, and there wasn't a lot left that you could do with a nickname with George Irvin Perdue. So my father just said, looks like Sonny to me, and I've had Sonny all my life, and that's who I am.
His father was a row crop and a dairy farmer.
He loved to grow watermelons and cantaloupes and sweet corn and beans and peas and those kind of things.
His mother was a teacher.
I tell people my mother taught English for 42 years, and I said I still get PTSD over dangling participles.
For young Sonny, life on the farm was hard work, but also rewarding.
The responsibility that I had there on my father and our family's farm was significant. I had purposeful, meaningful work to do. They were not chores. They were things to accomplish on a family farm.
It would instill in him a work ethic that would drive him for the rest of his life.
I think I loved to work. Growing up, I learned how to work on a small farm there and really understood the accomplishments of hard work. And so I thrive on that.
Another of his farm duties would teach him a skill that would also come in handy one day.
We would harvest watermelons, and I would take a 1.5 ton truck from Bonaire, Georgia, to the new Atlanta Farmers Market out here at Forest Park and sit on those concrete stanchions there with an old army cot at that point in time selling watermelons. I cut my teeth on trading with those, we call them pin hookers, who would come and try to pick off farmers there and negotiate with them. So I think that was an interesting part of my upbringing.
I mean, you couldn't imagine at the time that would be a skill that would serve you well in politics the rest of your life.
No, exactly right. Yeah, it's just learning human nature, learning negotiation, and learning how to come to a deal.
Sports also played a big role in his development. Warner Robins High School was created in 1953, and while they would someday be a high school football powerhouse, those early years were quite the opposite.
It's built a great reputation after I left in football. It was not all that successful in football while I was there. But however, in my junior year, we did have a perfect season, 0-10.
Perdue played both offense and defense in his first 2 years on the team, eventually becoming the starting quarterback during his senior year. Those teams weren't very good, but Perdue found a way to distinguish himself.
I did have the benefit of winning the passing crown for that and won AAA that year in 1965, 64 actually, in the football season that stood for about, I think, 17 or 18 years. And that was before the passing genre of high school football these days. And I think it was only like, 1,900 yards or something like that. And people said, well, how'd you do that? I said, well, we had to. We couldn't run the ball.
While football was a passion, there was something else Perdue wanted even more.
I actually had offers from out of state, playing offers out of state, but I wanted to go to veterinary school so badly, and to get into veterinary school, you pretty much had to apply from the state you were in that way. That was the University of Georgia. So that's the reason I decided to go to the University of Georgia and also walk on to try to accomplish both of those.
Perdue enrolled at the University of Georgia in 1965 and was a walk-on to the UGA football team.
I was not a D1 athlete. Let's just say that. I teasingly tell people I was small, but I was slow. and that's not a D. I didn't have the capacity to be a D1 athlete at that time or any other time, but I had the heart, and it was almost like the Doug Flutie kind of thing. I had the mind and the brain and the analysis that way, but I didn't have the physical skills to compete at that level. So it was hard to distinguish myself.
Purdue only played his freshman year, choosing instead to focus on his undergrad and veterinary school studies. It was during that time that he had another life-changing event.
I had a high school friend. She said, "I've got this girl that you need to meet. She's a freshman, and she was telling Mary all the time, I got this guy you need to meet." So it was like, you got to meet her, you got to meet him kind of thing. So we agreed to a blind date. It was a terrible date. I had a migraine headache that night. I bet I didn't say 5 words, but that started a 53-year, I guess, with the dating perspective, 57 years, 53 years of marriage, but we dated for about 4 years prior to getting married.
He graduated in 1971 with a degree in veterinary medicine, and the next year, Mary and he would get married.
I'd already signed up for a military obligation because Vietnam was roiling and I wanted to do my patriotic duty as that well, so I signed up. And then in 71, when I graduated, Vietnam was calming down to a certain degree, and I was at an Air Force obligation, so I was served in Columbus, Ohio that way. It was really a public health mission. Food safety and those kind of things was the mission of a veterinarian.
Purdue would serve in the Air Force until 1974, leaving the service as a captain.
I'd met a graduate of University of Georgia 5 years earlier that persuaded me to come to Raleigh, North Carolina. And it was an absolute great partnership. The fact is, I'd been busy working on the farm. I had never worked in a veterinary office until my junior and senior year in veterinary school. So the circumstances were ideal. Great community, Raleigh, North Carolina, great neighborhood, church, family growing, neighbors, all those kind of great partners, an affluent veterinary practice at that point in time. But I just became unfulfilled at that point in time. I decided in 1976 that I'd come back home, and my brother-in-law and I began an agribusiness company.
Back home in Bon Air, Purdue was appointed to the Houston County Planning and Zoning Commission.
When a senator who had served that region in that district for 18 years decided late in the cycle not to offer for re-election, county leaders came and said, "Would you run for it?" I had no aspiration to running for elected office. I was happy with doing my civic rent on planning and zoning, had a growing family, a growing business, church and civic responsibilities there, so I really didn't.
It took a planned vacation with Mary to colonial Williamsburg, Virginia, to persuade Purdue.
We went there and started walking those dirt streets, understanding the founding of this country came by people coming from their law practices, their medical practices, their farms, their educators, and coming together to do the public's business and then go back home. That was essentially the citizen legislature that we had at that point in time. So we came back and agreed to run for office, and I was elected in 1990 to begin serving in 1991.
For the next 11 years, he would serve in the state Senate, the first 8 as a Democrat. He chaired the Senate Higher Education Committee and became a trusted deputy of Lieutenant Governor Pierre Howard. He would steadily rise in the Senate leadership ranks, first as a majority leader and then as a Senate President pro temp in 1997. And like many conservative Democrats in Georgia at the time, he switched parties in 1998.
When I was born in 1946 in Perry, Georgia, they stamped Democrat on your birth certificate. I made a political decision, I called it Truth in Advertising, in 1998 to change parties and became a Republican at that point in time, and believing in limited government and lesser government was better, and more of a Republican platform.
In 2001, he resigned from his Senate seat to make a run for the governor's office.
My family's why I'm running for governor. As Mary and I look at those precious little twin granddaughters, I want Georgia to be as bright for them as the Georgia I remember.
In the 2002 election, Sonny Perdue would go on to beat the Democrat incumbent Roy Barnes with 57% of the votes
becoming the 81st governor of Georgia and the first Republican since 1868 to hold the office.
Welcome to the party, folks.
Many people had no idea what to expect, and my goal, just like my whole life had been, was to prove them wrong and to prove them that I was a value-oriented person trying to get good value, a good return on investment for taxpayer dollars. You know that era, 2003 to 2011, when I governed, had twin recessions. So I teasingly said it probably took a penny pinching farmer to try to get the money out of there. When your revenue is decreasing sometimes at double digits in a year, and you have a balanced budget amendment, and you cannot spend within that year more than you take in.
During his first term, he advocated for cutting waste in state government, mainly through the sale of surplus vehicles and real estate to help offset the financial impact of the 2001 dot-com bubble recession. He pushed for local control over education, which he claimed helped increase SAT scores and created more opportunities for charter and private schools, but also fired members of the Clayton County School Board over ethic violations. And he created the Commission for a New Georgia.
We put a lot of CEOs and C-suite people on a huge commission saying, how can we literally, government's not a business, but how can we run government more like a business with return on investment and making sure we're doing the right things?
In 2005, he pushed for the passing of the Georgia Land Conservation Act, which would go on to preserve over 200,000 acres in the state.
Anyone can tell you they can count on Sonny Perdue. His word is his bond.
In 2006, he won re-election over his Democrat opponent, Mark Taylor. And in 2007, the state would be challenged again with another economic collapse during the Great Recession.
The economic storm we now find ourselves in is unlike anything we've seen. These are hard times for Georgians. Many of our friends and neighbors have lost their jobs, and others are working harder and longer for less.
Also that year, another challenge, this time a severe drought that would threaten agriculture, water supplies, and lead to a series of wildfires throughout the state.
The thing about a drought is you don't ever know when it's going to end. And after we've done all those conservation things, I call for prayer and people around the state. And I guess I learned that when in agribusiness, we depended on our farmers for their livelihood, for their buying products and then selling us their products in the grain business. And they depended on their crops. And guess what? Their crops depended on rain. And if that wasn't successful, they weren't successful. If they weren't successful, we weren't going to be successful. So early on, I took no shame in calling for prayer for rain because I learned early on who makes it rain.
As governor, Perdue opposed same-sex marriage and supported some of the toughest illegal immigration legislation in the state at that time.
And I think there was many frustration on the state level in that we believed immigration was a federal issue, and still do, and it was not being dealt with on the federal level. So many states felt like there were immigrants coming in, illegal immigrants coming into the state. Many people felt like they were taking benefits from health care and educational issues that were not being properly counted or compensated for. And so there was legislation, I thought fairly reasonable legislation while I was governor there to make sure that we dealt with those issues.
During his time in office, Perdue received criticism from some supporters for not putting the controversial 1956 state flag version with its Confederate imagery on a 2005 referendum after saying that he would during his campaign. Critics questioned the value of the Go Fish Education Center he championed and built near his hometown of Bonaire.
Is there anything that surprised you about being a two-term governor? Is that maybe as you went into that you didn't expect?
People were not used to a Republican governor. It had been 135 years. What was going to be different? How would this person govern in a way? And we wanted to make sure that we indicated to people that we really wanted the best for all Georgians. I mean, I wanted the best for those people that voted for me, certainly, but I wanted the best for those people who didn't vote for me. My goal was to leave Georgia in a way that they would want more of that kind of management governing perspective in all aspects.
After leaving office, Sonny, along with his cousin David Perdue, formed Perdue Partners in 2011, a global trading company which helped U.S. businesses trade with overseas partners. In 2017, President Trump announced his nomination of Sonny Perdue as the 31st U.S. Secretary of Agriculture. He was easily confirmed in the U.S. Senate.
Well, good morning. Good morning. I've been waiting to see y'all, and it looks like y'all been waiting to see me too, right?
The federal government job, what was that like? Was it frustrating? Was it as bureaucratic as one might surmise?
Most people ask me, what was he like
Yeah.
in serving under the first Trump administration? And honestly, it was very interesting. He and I got along very well. I was there to serve a constituency that I thought was very important to him and to the United States. That's the agricultural community, the food producing community. I took it as part of our national security of being food security.
During his tenure, Perdue said he strived to be a good steward of the country's fields, forests, and farmers. He created a mentoring program to help attract new farmers, reduced farming regulations, and endorsed a plan that would have monetized carbon capture and innovated farming.
Farmers are great innovators, they're great entrepreneurs, they're great ingenuity, and many of the OEM equipment we see from the majors today started in a farm shed somewhere.
While there was public criticism of his skepticism on climate science, Perdue received high marks from farmers and was seen as an advocate in Washington. When President Trump lost re-election in 2020, Perdue left Washington as one of the few people to keep his cabinet post for the full term. In February of 2022, Sonny Perdue was chosen by the University System of Georgia Board of Regents as its 14th chancellor.
Our goal is for every campus to be their own personality, their own culture, to allow them the freedom to be everything they can be. And that's under the leadership of the president of the university or the college that way. And that's our biggest job and the most important job we have is choosing the right leaders.
His position as chancellor oversees 48,000 faculty members and more than 300,000 students with an annual budget of almost $10 billion.
Congratulations.
After 50 years of public service and multiple leadership roles, I had to ask,
Which job do you like best that you've had so far?
That's an unfair question.
I try to ask unfair questions.
I like the job I'm in best at the time, I think. Again, I've enjoyed all three, and they've all been different, as you certainly said. But, you know, it's hard to beat the governorship in any way. Secretary of Agriculture in the United States is an important job, and we were fulfilled in that constituency of helping the growers of food and the producers across the country, and growing a healthy atmosphere for farmers was very important. And then again, I've talked about the life-changing experience here as chancellor. So I've really enjoyed all of them. I think I would say probably my favorite is the one I'm in at that time.
Now in his 80s, the father of 4 and grandparent of 14 has no plans to slow down.
People say, well, when are you going to quit? I don't know, really what quitting is, I think, is really what I guess I'm trying to say. I believe in doing your best, that my parents indwelled that in me, do your best, and in everything that I do. So I'm not here to bide time.
You're just getting started.
I'm having a midlife crisis.
If you could get in the time machine and go back to before 1990, would Sonny Perdue in 1987 be surprised to see how your life has played out?
Absolutely, absolutely. Again, I was growing a business, and I really had come back home in 1976, having become a veterinarian, having served my country in the Air Force as an obligation there, and then practicing veterinary medicine in Raleigh, North Carolina, becoming homesick, never getting over the red clay of Middle Georgia, coming back home and beginning an agribusiness, growing a business there. Absolutely, I'd be totally shocked to see what's happened in those 50 years.
In 2025, amid the country's political divisiveness and discord, Chancellor Perdue came out and vowed to continue to protect free speech on Georgia campuses, saying that students need the right to be able to discuss issues in a civil, respectful manner persuaded only by another's thoughtful arguments.